So this is a DJI Mini 2, and one question I've been asked quite frequently since beginning to upload these videos is, when it comes to UK drone law, what do I need in terms of flyer ID, operator ID? Do I need one or the other? Do I need both before I fly this specific device? Well, we're going to be looking at that today. Now, I do want to point you to another YouTuber called Ian of London, who has a wealth of information on the legalities of drone flying, and he's far more versed in this area than I am, so I would encourage you to check that out. But in order to get the basics down, that's what we're going to be doing in this video. And don't forget to be subscribed for future Mini 2 content. Now, when it comes to flying drones here in the UK, there are two forms of registration you need to be aware of. They are registration for a flyer ID and registration for an operator ID. Now, the operator ID lasts for 12 months. Once you have it, it is £9 per year. However, there is also the flyer ID. The flyer ID lasts for 5 years and costs nothing. Now, with a drone such as this one, the DJI Mini 2 or the Mini 1, because they are under 250 grams but not classed as a toy since they have a camera, you are going to require an operator ID. Interestingly, you are not going to require a flyer ID, though in all honesty, as I mentioned, there is no cost to getting a flyer ID. You can complete the registration at the same time as getting your registration complete for the operator ID, and the multiple choice questions, there's like a test for the flyer ID, are really actually going to help reinforce your knowledge of drone law and could potentially save you from getting some fines further on down the road. So, as I say, there's really no reason not to get that flyer ID if you're going to be flying a Mini 2, even though technically you're not required to do so. But the operator ID, that is a requirement. So at the start of this year, the Civil Aviation Authority here in the UK released a new classification system that is going to be a legal requirement for any new released drones going forward. Now, the DJI Mini 2 was released last year before this classification, so isn't part of it, which means that for legacy drones such as this one, we need to understand exactly how this would be classified if it were under that new class system. Now, the most basic classification is Class 0, and Class 0 has three subcategories. The first subcategory is that the device, the aircraft, is a toy. The second subcategory of Class 0 is that the device is not a toy but doesn't have a camera. And the third subcategory of Class 0 is that the device is not a toy and does have a camera, and that is what the DJI Mini 2 would fall under. That means that in order to fly this thing, it needs to be registered with an operator ID but not a flyer ID, as I mentioned. Now, once you have your operator ID, part of that means that you're going to have to display it on the drone itself. Yes, all you Mini 2 owners here in the UK, you have to display your operator ID on the device before it is flown. Now, there's a number of requirements as to how you can display your operator ID. The basics are that it has to be either clearly visible or easily accessible in a compartment on the aircraft, as in no tools are required to get access to it. The writing of the operator ID has to be at least 3mm tall, which isn't that big, but it is worth noting. All I've done, it's very simple. So I typed it down in Microsoft Word, printed it off, laminated it, and then I just stuck it onto the side of the drone here using a little bit of sellotape. And I did that at the start of this year, and as you can see, it is still very much stuck on there, despite the fact I've flown in some quite variants of weathers, as you folks who have been following me will know. It hasn't budged, it's doing a fine job, and that's pretty much all you need. You don't need to go ahead and spend a lot on labels or professional printing. I didn't do that, it wasn't needed. But you do need to get the operator ID displayed on the drone. Incidentally, if you own more than one drone, you can use the same operator ID on all your devices. And that actually brings us to another advantage of getting a flyer ID. There's really no reason not to. If you ever come across a situation where you're potentially going to be able to fly another drone that's above 250 grams, if you have that flyer ID in place, then as long as whoever owns that drone gives you permission to do so, then you can actually fly that without any further requirements needed. So I hope that clarifies the situation. Operator ID, yes, you need that. Flyer ID, you don't need it, but I would recommend it anyhow. And if DJI do end up releasing a successor to this drone, for example the DJI Mini 3 perhaps, then that will be using the new class system, but the rules will remain the same, so long as the drone specifications are very similar and the drone itself is under 250 grams, which means that if you end up upgrading from the Mini 2 to whatever the successor of this drone is going to be, all you'll need to do is print the operator ID you already have onto the side of that drone and you'll be good to go immediately. Well, there we have it then, folks. I hope that clarifies the situation on how IDs are needed and how you display your operator ID on your DJI Mini 2. It's not the largest drone in the world, as you know, but there's still plenty of space to just get that stuck onto the side, as I've done. I hope this video has been a help to you. If it has, please don't forget to drop a like. But thanks so much for your time. Have a wonderful day and happy flying.